Well, good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And this is the New Thought Media Network. And tonight we have a special presentation, Transgender Awareness. My name is Reverend Barbarea, and my pronouns are she, they. And tonight's program is about creating a safe and sacred space to improve and expand on our understanding of transgender. Now, November 13th to 19th was Transgender Awareness Week, and yesterday was Transgender Day of Remembrance. And we took a pause to remember the lives of many transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming persons killed in acts of targeted transphobic violence. Now, TDOR began after three transgender women of color, Rita Hester, Chanel Pickett, and Monique Thomas, were murdered in the Boston area of Massachusetts in 1998, and the local community wanted to honor them in some way. And November 20th was chosen as the anniversary of the death of Chanel Pickett as the first Transgender Day of Remembrance in 1999. So tonight we take a moment, so I invite you right now, just take a moment and join me in silence. Remembering the lives of each person who has gone before us, we stand tall knowing that each one of us are here because someone else has made it safe for us to do so. So I'd like to begin this evening with our land acknowledgement, and then we'll get into our show. So we are honored to be meeting on the land of many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island. And we acknowledge and thank the original caretakers and knowledge keepers of this territory, recorded and unrecorded, who have shared responsibility for this land. We accept our responsibility to peaceably share and care for the resources that surround us, and we also acknowledge, as inhabitants of these lands, the inequity and discrimination continue to affect our BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ+ family. We therefore strive to be allies and to take an active part in reconciliation. Recognizing our ultimate oneness and acknowledging our reality, both past and present, we commit to moving forward in a spirit of mutual cooperation. Here at CSL and at the New Thought Media Network, we believe we are one. Well, tonight I'm excited to begin this evening with our wonderful musical guest, Summer Osborne. She is an award-winning American singer-songwriter, TEDx speaker, artist, activist, motivational speaker, and spiritual collaborator who entertains audiences throughout North America with a fusion of music and spoken word. Her platform is creating space for humanity to heal and grow while facilitating the shift that she calls a spiritual revolution. Summer Osborne, take us away.
I am here, I am whole as I am. I am safe, I am loved as I am. I am grateful and I am free. I'm as perfect as can be. I am here, I am whole as I am. Nothing can illuminate the darkness like a serenade. Nothing can make peace like a song. We've got a ways to go, but then we're closer than we've ever been. So let's walk together on and on. I am here, I am whole as I am. I am safe, I am loved as I am. I am grateful and I'm free. I'm as perfect as can be. I am here. I am whole as I am. I propose a family that looks a lot like you and me, including all the people that we love. Then we'll take a photograph of everybody as they laugh, put it in the book entitled Us. I am here, I am whole as I am. I am safe, I am loved as I am. I am grateful and I'm free. I'm as perfect as can be. I am here, I am whole as I am. May seem just like a song, may seem just like a thought, but it soon will take hold and become a truth that's taught for generations and generations and generations. I am here, I am whole as I am. I am safe, I am loved as I am. I am grateful and I'm free. I'm as perfect as can be. I am here, I am whole as I am. I am here, I am whole as I am.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. It's, that message that as I am, I think every one of us, I know for me, I want people just to accept me as I am, the way I am. And you might like me or not, and that's okay. But as I am should be enough. Great song. Thank you. Thank you. And can you share a little bit about your spiritual revolution?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, let's see those.
My spiritual revolution, because I made it permanent. Well, when I talk about spiritual revolution, it's not a revolt necessarily, but a turn.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Industrial Revolution, pre-Industrial Revolution, there's a little bit of industry, but not a lot. And then it seemed like overnight it took a turn and there was industry everywhere, like all at once.
So let's make a turn here.
In spiritual, like from the Latin spiritus, to breathe, what gives you breath. And I think that we're moving into a place where, as a species, really, where we have all this stuff that we could possibly even dream of, right? And we have, the paradoxes with all this stuff. That's still not it. What's the purpose? We're asking, we're making a turn in humanity. And with that comes change and transition and sometimes, and that's always a challenge.
It is.
And so I feel like, I am here, and the platform that I use for spiritual revolution is to help through that transition.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this we're at a very pivotal point a point in our time where when we look at the various rights of different groups and stuff, what we're forgetting is the fact that these are human rights and that no one should be exempt from those. And that's the change, the turn that we're requiring at this time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that song. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I'm so excited to continue on because we really are talking about human rights here. Every person is entitled to work, live, and play in an environment of mutual respect, dignity, and inclusion. And wherever we are in the world, we have that right. That's supposed to be guaranteed. In my notes, I underlined guaranteed because although it seems to be said there, it doesn't necessarily follow through. So I'm doing my work to create a world that works for the highest and best good of all life. And so that's animal, plant, human. We're all in this together. And I think the more we can learn to live together, even when we don't understand each other, let's strive to understand. And that's the place where I'm hoping that we will get to tonight, that we'll have some conversation, that if you have questions about what's going on, why is this a thing, what's happening, when did it all start, maybe some of those questions will get answered tonight. And you might find that really we're all in this together, and every single one of us, we breathe, we eat, we live, we're born, we die, and each one of us has our own path. So I want to begin. I've got a couple of great guests tonight, and the first is Reverend Junia Joplin, going by June, and her pronouns are she, her, and she is the Associate Pastor of Programs and Congregational Care for the Metropolitan Community Church here in Toronto. And she received a Bachelor of Arts from Appalachian State University and a Master of Divinity from the Baptist Theological Seminary in Richmond, Virginia. She is a past recipient of the Canada 150 Community Leader Award and has been named one of Canada's top 25 women of influence in 2021. June is a member of Good Faith Media Strategic Board, and she works with Transmission Ministry Collective to provide support to trans seminarians and clergy. And June began working at MCC Toronto on March 15th. Welcome, June. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. And I know today is a very special day for your son. And so if you have to leave early, we get that. We're just really grateful you're here.
Yeah,
Can you share a little bit about your journey and then maybe a little bit about the work that you're doing in the community?
sure. Yeah, thanks again for having me. Gosh, I'm still kind of, my head spins when I think about my journey. So, it's never, it's not that it's a hard question to ask. It's just, oh, where do we begin?
Yeah.
I grew up down south in the state of North Carolina in a really small town in pretty much the Bible Belt, not too far from where Billy Graham is from, not too far from where Dolly Parton is from, just in the Appalachian foothills. And from a pretty young age, I knew that I kind of wanted to do something in the church, and I also, at the same time, I had this sense that okay, it would sure be great if I had been born a girl. And I didn't know what to make. I didn't know what to say about that. I didn't know who to talk to about it. It just kind of felt like this thing it didn't feel like anything I felt ashamed of it. And certainly as I got older, I was taught to hide it. And I was given a lot of more reasons to feel ashamed about it. So I moved here to Canada in 2014. After serving my first church out of seminary down in Richmond, Virginia for about 7 years. And, throughout my career, I got fortunate enough to kind of move myself into more and more progressive, more and more open spaces.
Yeah.
And so, I landed in the Toronto suburbs at this wonderful church full of really lovely people. my family at the time kind of felt like, it would be interesting to see what life looks like outside of the Southern US, which we love. It's got a special place in our heart, but it can be a lot of us Southern expats have a complicated relationship with that really beautiful and often really progressive in places area that gets maligned a lot. So we just wanted to see what life would be like outside of it. One of the things we jumped into to help us get, acquainted to our new life in our new country was hockey, frankly. And so my kids started playing hockey. I started playing hockey, and there was a young trans man who was playing some years ago in the Ontario Hockey Federation, and just a youth hockey league here in Ontario. I think he was out in Oshawa. Mm-hmm. And his coach was making him change in the women's change room. And so he and his mother filed a human rights complaint here in Ontario. They won. And one of the outcomes of that case was that any adult that was volunteering with a youth hockey association or league or team here in the province of Ontario had to do an online webinar on understanding gender presentation, gender expression, gender identity, stuff like that. All the aspects of, I guess, human identity.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, and I mean, I'm in my late 30s at this point, it's just, I was the manager of my son's team, and I wasn't a coach or anything. I was just, the mom who plans snacks and like what hotel are we staying in when we go to the tournament, stuff like that. So I took this course, and for the first time in my life, this stuff was explained to me, like what it actually means to be transgender, how you can have an assigned sex that is different than your gender identity. And so this thing that I had just thought was, I don't know, just this feeling that might go away or that should be ignored. I came to realize that this is just part of who I am. It's never going to go away. I'm going to grow out of it. If anything, it's going to get worse. And trans identity is not something that you pick up somewhere or that you become through a process of like medical or social transition. It's just something that some people are. Some people that never become self-accepting, they're still transgender. And some people who never transition or come out, you're still transgender. It's just, it is just a quality of human existence that some of us have. I never thought of it that way.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, but by the end of that hockey season, 2017, 2018, I realized, oh, this is me. And I started to reach out for resources. I came out to my then spouse, who was very loving and supportive. That was her first response. Mm-hmm. And then, the trouble becomes, well, you're a Baptist pastor in the Toronto suburbs. What does coming out look like?
Yeah.
There are stories of trans pastors who came out while they were serving churches. Mm-hmm. Do not tend to have happy endings.
No.
Usually that situation resulted in a termination, a firing. Often it ended up being a matter of church leaders, the deacons, the executive, the board, whatever like that, would pull the pastor aside and say, we do not want this scandal thrust upon our community, so you need to resign and disappear. And I talked to, in those days when I was planning to come out, not sure how to do it, I talked to a few of those pastors. And I came to realize, like, I can't do that. I cannot in any way be complicit in my own marginalization. And so when I come out, against my, I'm going to do it very publicly. I'm going to do it in such a way to get a lot of attention, which is not my natural, way of being, especially in the last couple of years since I got a lot of attention. And so, essentially I did what a lot of trans people do from 2018 to 2020. I kind of lived as June part-time, and made some friends as June and started making plans to transition and socially full time.
Mhm.
And COVID came. We started doing church online, and so by the time my coming out sermon rolled around, we were doing church via Zoom and YouTube. So my coming out sermon, I came out to my congregation. None of them knew it was coming. At the end of a sermon I delivered on Sunday, June the 14th, 2020. And
Wow.
it was a big thing. It shocked a lot of people. And my congregation and I spent the next 5 weeks or so in this process of discernment, answering questions, asking questions. Some were really beautiful, but a lot of them were kind of insensitive. Some of them were just outright mean-spirited. Not all of them. I think there was one question about, how much healthier will our church become now that June is really herself. So,
That's beautiful.
and I got some encouraging emails and contacts. I got some that weren't. The news media figured it out, and I talked to CBC, and I think I was in the Toronto Star. And a couple other news outlets. And then 5 weeks later, the congregation voted to fire me. And it was really tough news to get, but 11 voting members voted that day, and 58 voted to fire me, 53 voted to keep me. So it was just about a 50-50 split. So I lost just by a few ticks. And that's when the story got really big. And, I was in the New York Times, I was on BBC, I was on Fox News, I was in Brazilian Vogue. And it was just a bit of a whirlwind. And I started getting churches around the world, because we were all doing church digitally at this point, said, join us on Zoom and deliver the morning sermon. So I was out of work for about 30 Sundays or so, and I probably preached at 45 or 50 different churches. I could do because
ready to hear you.
And in most of those cases, not all, but most, I was the first trans person to ever deliver a sermon on a Sunday morning. And that visibility to me felt really important. I had been sort of attending on and off as I could MCC Toronto, which is I describe as Toronto's like historic and history making queer church.
Yeah.
And had gotten to know the staff there, and the senior pastor at the time said, well, we're going to have this job opening, you should apply. And so in March of 2021, I joined their staff, and I've been there ever since. The spotlight has dimmed a bit, mercifully, and I can say a little bit about, how I've intentionally tried to avoid it. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I generally describe myself as, a basic suburban hockey mom who just happens to be a trans woman. And I get along pretty well with my former spouse. We've been celebrating a family birthday together this evening, and my kids, and most of my family's pretty happy with it. And I'm far enough along, I guess, that one of the funny things that my therapist will say to me every now and then is, honey, that's just being a woman. So it's I'm eager and kind of excited to move into the phase in my life where I don't have to feel like my womanhood is second class to my transness, and I can be a woman first, and then transition can be something that I did, not something I am. So that's where I am. It's a nutshell, but it's a big nutshell.
Yeah, it is. And how did your children do? Like, as you were speaking with them, I mean, they must have had some sense of this going on with you.
Yeah, I think they probably did. And I think one of these days they'll be able to answer that question themselves really fully. But my children were 11 and 5 or 6 when I came out to them.
Yep.
And I think they got it. My younger son especially, it wasn't too, people often think that trans people are some like existential threat to children, but children get it, like they, you
They
know,
do.
and so, but they've been doing really well. And, you know, my former spouse and I didn't always get along. We had you know, just when you're hiding something that big, and you know, there's other mental health issues,
Yeah.
it makes it hard to be the partner that, you know, your spouse deserves. And I wasn't always a good partner. And but that said, we do recognize in one another that we're good parents. You know, she's never said anything bad about me to our children, and vice versa. In fact, I think she's maybe the best mother out there.
Beautiful.
One of my heroes. She's wonderful. And so we recognize that in one another, and we try to work together for the good of our kids, because they're the people that we care the most about. And
Yeah.
So it's challenging, having a divided home, especially in Toronto. It makes little financial sense, but we do okay. And I don't really know how to describe our relationship, whether it's a friendship or what, but I would say that, you know, we still have our moments, but it's on good terms. And my kids, I think, I don't, you know, I don't want to presume too much, but I think they have two pretty wonderful moms.
Well, they're very fortunate. And I think too that um, when we're just when we find ourselves and we're honest with ourselves and then honest with the people around us, that changes everything.
Great.
And it's wonderful to hear that you and your former spouse actually are putting your children first and foremost, right? Let's be friendly with each other and maybe become friends as we raise our children with a loving environment, because they deserve that
They
for
certainly
sure.
do.
Yeah. Yeah. I had that with one of my ex-husbands. It's, you know, our kids were of most importance. So that became the bond that kept us together. That's wonderful. So in your, when your church fired you, and I know a CSL minister who went through the same type of thing. When that happens, like, what are some of the sort of feelings or whatever that you had around that? Like, what was that experience like for you? That-
Well, yeah, it was hard. I was out with a friend that night, a really wonderful person who said, you know, I'm going to take you to dinner just to get your mind off of the vote. And I was sitting on a patio in Mississauga. It was, you know, it was July, so nice evening. And I got the call that I'd lost my job, and
Mm.
I cried. But I was also like, it, I was sad. It was difficult to end my relationship with that congregation the way it did.
Yeah.
Um, I do recognize that it would have been hard, like staying would have been the harder
Yeah.
path to take. I was ready to embrace that, and I made that really clear in my communications with the congregation. And you know, I sent them all. You know, this wasn't public, but you know, after I delivered my coming out sermon, I sent a letter to. I sent 3 letters actually: one to my staff, one to my executive committee, and one to my congregation. And
Yeah.
you know, the message in all 3 of those is like, you know, we could make history here, and it might be challenging, but I'm in if you're in.
Yeah.
And so losing my job, I guess, freed me from some of that pressure. It it
Yeah.
it let it let it let, I guess, the story get a little bigger, which was not my, you know, I didn't transition to be a news story, but I did recognize that people seeing this and hearing about this, they would have conversations about their church, or um, they would maybe become self-accepting themselves, or they would come to a place of peace between their identity and their faith, which is something a lot of people struggle with. Um, it was hard, but I was in my best moments. I was really I tried to be optimistic.
Yeah.
A friend of mine started a GoFundMe for me, and that really helped during those 6 or 8 months that I wasn't earning any money.
Yeah.
And that just meant the world to me.
Oh, of course.
And I know that there's a lot of spiritual trauma that I'm still kind of processing, and I occasionally something will happen in my new church that triggers that a bit. I'm not always sure where it's going to come from, but
Yeah.
we're having a congregational vote on a new pastor in a couple of weeks, and just even talking about a congregational vote on a pastor kind of, makes
The anxiety.
stand up. Yeah, but I try to keep, people are so caring, and the thing I often say about MCC Toronto is that if it reminded me of any other church I've ever gone to or worked in, I couldn't work there. So it's just this totally different.
It is.
It's this totally different community that means the world to me, and it's helping me to heal spiritually.
I love that. I love that. And anytime I'm at MCC, because my daughter sings there sometimes, and
Beautifully, I would add, beautifully. I can't wait to hear her again. But
oh, well, it'll be after she gets her tonsils out and her throat heals.
okay,
That's next week. But yeah, it is such a welcoming community. And although I'm not a member there, but whenever I go, I take communion, which is not something we do in our spiritual tradition. But for me, there's something about receiving communion from you, because that matters to me. It's like there's, I don't know, I just feel a connection with you. And
okay,
there's something about receiving communion where it just takes the service for me and takes me deep into that place where my spirituality began. And
sure.
so I find it as an incredibly healing experience every time I'm there. So when I'm speaking at other places, it's like I can't come, but when I can,
Yeah, I always love to see you. Um, communion really is at the center of MCC life. It gets our denomination is informally called like Metropolitan Community Churches. That's just what people call it. The actual name is like the Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches, or UFMCC. But throughout our denomination, well, our denomination was started in 1960. 1966, I want to say, a couple years before Stonewall,
yeah,
and at a Bible study hosted by Reverend Elder Troy Perry, who was a gay Pentecostal preacher from the Deep South who had been defrocked, kicked out of ministry, and at first said, I'm going to start this spiritual home for primarily gay men. And that's what we're kind of known for. And when people think of MCCs, they think, well, that's the gay church, that's the queer church, that's the church that has a gay pastor or a lesbian pastor or a trans pastor. And yes, it is that, but it soon evolved into a community where those involved said, this is a church with a radically open communion table. Like everybody gets communion. Everybody. And just because, and I my sense, and you probably recognize this too, is that sexual orientation and gender identity just happen to be two of the biggest taboos in our society. And so when we started by saying those two things don't matter. If you are queer, if you're a gay man, if you're a lesbian woman, if you're bisexual, if you're transgender, non-binary, any of those things that society says this is the biggest thing you should be ashamed of. This is the single greatest factor that makes you marginalized. It's okay. Come
and
to
we're
the
going to celebrate you.
Yeah, we're going to celebrate you and welcome you to the table, because this shows that your creator, God, the source of everything, loves you and wants to give you grace and strength and sustain you. And once you open the door to, like, once you bust down the big barrier, the big taboo, you find that, we became a denomination where, bring your mental illness, bring your disability or your ability, bring your, the issues that you might have with your finances or class or any other thing that we divide ourselves about. And boy, that's, because it's one thing to say, okay, you can show up if you're gay, you can show up if you're trans, but
That's different.
it's so much bigger just to say this grace, this love is for you, even you, no matter what, it's for you. And that's, we do it every Sunday, in fact, because
Yeah,
we don't want to discriminate against people that show up one Sunday a month.
exactly. I
And
love it.
oh, it's great. And I love serving communion. It's one of my favorite things to do. When people come through my serving station, I say, this is the bread of life, and you are loved with an everlasting love. And that's because I want people to hear that about themselves. And sometimes it's such a moving experience. It's one of my favorite spiritual practices, and
Yeah.
I get moved to tears serving communion because every week I'm serving it to somebody who has been told in another religious tradition, this is not for you. You can't have this. And so you can kind of see like that excites me. And I could talk about it all night.
Well, I love that because, yeah, I always get a little bit teary too. In fact, it's happening now. That ability to just be in a community, and my daughter as well, who's not really a church person, but she loves MCC
Yeah.
and the people there, and it just, she was really sad because the World AIDS Day interfaith event will be happening, and that's the day after her surgery, so she's not singing. I'll be speaking there, but she can't come. I had to tell Dina no, but yeah. So, well, we've got lots more to talk about. We're going to take a little commercial break, and then we're going to be back. You're watching Transgender Awareness on the New Thought Media Network, and I'm here with Reverend June. I'm Reverend Barbara, and we are really excited that you're here. So don't go away. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm so grateful to be able to do this show tonight. It just feels so perfect. And I want to introduce my other guest, the incredible Shay Laddie. And Shay was born in Jamaica in the 70s. We're just giving away your age here, my apologies. Came to Canada at the age of 18. And shortly after arriving in Canada, went to college, then university, and there saw the first person who outwardly identified as a trans man. It was a really profound moment for the way he viewed the world. And since childhood, he has always been strongly opinionated, love that, and a fierce advocate for human rights. Shay started to medically transition in the summer of 2021 and under the supervision of the doctor. He is a parent, a spouse, a brother, a son, a colleague, a friend, and he identifies as human. I love that. Welcome, Shay. So tell us a little bit about your path. What,
Well,
what has yours been like?
I think I'd have to start at the beginning. Growing up in Jamaica in the 70s, being a 70s baby in Jamaica, a place where there was no language for anyone that was trans.
Of course.
We didn't talk about LGBTQ issues.
Mhm.
It was not something that was, in the media. We didn't have books about it. I didn't see anyone around me that was queer from the LGBTQ community, or um, even more so the trans community, right? There was no language for it. For myself, and I sort of identified with a bit of what Reverend Junia spoke about. There was this feeling I had from earlier on. Something I just didn't fit the mold that most people had. You know what I mean? Very early on, my family started calling me a tomboy. I was, one of those kids climbing trees, running, playing with the boys. Everywhere the boys were, so was I, right?
Yeah.
But I also grew up in a very gendered time. I call it a very gendered time because there, even in school, sports were separated. Um, there was an expectation, for example, in high school, that everyone who was thought to be female would do home economics. I had zero interest. And then the boys would get to do carpentry. Of course, me being the fierce advocate I am, I went to the teachers and I tried to petition my cause to get into carpentry, right? But I wasn't allowed. The same thing with sports again. Girls did netball, boys did soccer. So again, not allowed to do the things that came naturally, not allowed to do the things that I was naturally inclined towards, right? I have one story where I recall um, myself and a cousin of mine, a female cousin of mine, who was about 6 months younger than me. For Christmas, my family got us identical dolls. And I remember about 2 years later at my grandparents' house, I found the doll in a box, brand new, never opened, never played with, nothing, right? And that was the story of my life. Always just getting the things that I didn't want, not knowing how to sort of express who I was, not being able to, and again, even if I was able to at that time, I don't know if I could have, not within my family context. I grew up in a Christian environment with extended family. My grandmother was deeply religious. So I don't even know how I would have approached that conversation to start with.
Right. Yeah.
So that overall was the experience in Jamaica. It wasn't until I came to Canada in the what was that the late 90s that I realized there were people who were more like me, right?
Yeah.
People who you know felt different, expressed themselves differently. Um, I remember there was I was an avid reader too, and I remember when I came here, I read a book by S. Beer Bergman called "Butch is a Noun." And in the book, I remember S. Beer Bergman talking about putting on his dad's shirt, and I said, "Wait a minute! I had an experience like that where when I was going to church, of all places, in Jamaica, I put on my grandpa's shirt and tie, and I had a skirt suit over it. So I had the jacket on, but I had that tie and the shirt on, and there was something just so empowering for me at the time, right? Just striding to church, never seen it before, and again, when I connect the well, I started to connect the dots when I read that book, for one. When I saw the person in university, the trans man, a lot of dots started to connect because it started to make sense who I was,
Yeah.
why I felt differently, why I couldn't connect with people, why I couldn't play the same way, most of the quote unquote girls at the time around me when I was growing up, how how they played, right? There was always just this feeling. Um, it's one of those things where when I look back, I'm thinking, there was nothing that I could have done differently, and I don't think during that time, um, even if I was brave enough, even if I was aware enough, I don't think I would have been free enough to speak. And so, being here in Canada, that's one of the things that I appreciated in coming here is getting that freedom, the right to say who I am, the right to still, um, be and to say, okay, I exist. I'm human. As I said in my bio there,
I
above
love
all else, I am human. I
that.
am. I remember when I came out as trans, a friend of mine who I've had for 20 odd years at this point said to me, and this is one of the things that I began to recognize, even within the LGBTQ community, there's still some issues that we have to still deal with. So it's not just the general society, but even within our smaller community, um, there can be phobia as well, transphobia as well. And I recall a friend of mine saying to me, "Well, so now, what do you believe that you're better than women? Are you expecting women to be subservient?" And this is someone I've known for over 2 decades that said this to me. And I said, well, no, I am who I am. I'm the same person I was yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. It's just I'm outwardly saying now, I am trans, right? Nothing changes. For me, I've been dressing in a masculine way for years, for a lot of years. As a matter of fact, when I was about 19, I remember one of the things that I experienced was naming. And I think a lot of trans folks probably um, go through this where you don't exactly identify with the name that you were assigned, right?
Yeah.
Remember, I started calling myself at 19 Uno. This is again before even becoming aware that, you know, this the word trans man was a thing.
Right.
And Uno actually stood for the unnamed one,
Oh, wow.
the
Okay.
unnamed one. And so
Yeah.
to this day, there are still people who know me as Uno because I went through a phase where I couldn't call myself by the name that I was assigned, right? Because that then spoke to my identity. And although I couldn't sort of capture the language to say this is why at the time, I just knew that it was not the entity that I wanted to be dealing with, right? So I have a lot of stories related to my experiences with being trans, coming out, how I relate to folks. I had a cousin, for example, when I came out, they called me by my what we call in the trans community my dead name,
Yeah.
and I quietly sort of corrected them and said, this is the name I'm going by. And I recall my cousin saying to me, well, I'm going to call you the name that I've known you as since you were,
Disrespect. Disrespect.
and I love my cousin. I love my cousin
Of
dearly.
course.
We were quite close growing up. And I remember I had to sit with myself for a while. I came off the phone. I didn't argue. And then I sent a very good, very nice, nicely worded text saying, this is the name that I'm going by. And I will not respond to any other name.
Good for you.
And
Wow.
these are some of the things that we you know what I mean, we have to journey through. But again, as I say, for me, I am the same person I was yesteryear, except I now have the language to say this is who I am.
And you get to show up and look the way you feel. You get to be the person you are
Yeah, exactly.
rather than, yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's, and for me, it's, I was born a woman and I identify as a woman. And so that, it's a really different thing. And through all of the reading and stuff I've done, because I just keep doing research because I don't know what I don't know. And what I keep coming back to is the idea of human rights. Like, why do I think that I can get into your lane? I don't know you, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what's inside another person. I only know my own path, my own way. It's so sitting back and putting judgment on somebody else when I don't know their path, I don't know their story, I don't know anything, to assume that I do, or to assume that they should be like me, bigger mistake even yet. And yet somehow that's what's happening a lot, both, I think with the LGBTQ community, but bigger than that, the rest of us, the people who identify as heterosexual or whatever. I loved seeing a sign one day that said, "So when did you decide that? When did you decide that?" And it just made me laugh, because for my life, and I'll just out myself a little bit, because I've always lived as a heterosexual woman, and yet if I'd been born at another time, that would not be the case. I'm sure I would have married a woman. So I consider myself on the queer spectrum. I consider myself bisexual. I'm in a happy marriage with a wonderful man who cooks for me and is a great, great husband. And I'm just grateful that I have found this. But it took me kind of finding myself and getting comfortable with myself before I could love another person and have a really loving relationship. And then sort of coming to that place where I could actually talk about the idea that, you know, I consider myself queer as well. That because and I've never tell my family that, so you're doing much better than I am. I I'm
Well,
I'm working on, just accepting myself and getting rid of the shame, like you talked about, June, the shame of just, why am I different? Why do I feel different? Why is it that the world, this colonial world has said, here's what everybody has to be, and we've
sure.
bought into that, and it isn't working. And I know Summer's got a great song to lead us into a little moment of shall we just ponder this for a moment and listen to Summer give us some good music, and then we'll go a little deeper. Gotta unmute you.
Which one did you want to hear? Do you want to hear Barbara? Did you want to hear the? Are you talking about "This Is Your Call"?
Yes. Yeah.
I need to scoot back a little bit. I'm loud on this one,
Oh.
like real loud.
We love you loud.
You feel a burning in your chest. You know you're different than the rest. And sometimes it makes it feel like you could cry. When you're looking at the world through the heart that's on your sleeve, rather than your saline eyes. And sometimes it scares you to death. And sometimes it stops you in your tracks. Sometimes it makes it feel like you're pushing for nothing. But then everything gets quiet and the world moves in slow motion. And that little voice inside you whispers, do something. This is your call to be the one. The one who will inspire, climb mountains high to find you that shines brighter than the sun. And you will not waver, you will stand tall, you will be brave. gonna be the difference between loving and resistance. So hear me when I say, you are able, you're willing, you're strong, and this is your call. Yes. This is your call. Yes. You hear the thunder in your voice. You know you have no other choice but to open up your mouth and just let it fly. When you look down at your hands and you know the best laid plans are the ones that push you up from deep inside. And they'll try to make you believe that you cannot question what you see, that you should just lay low. But no one's ever sown a seed without breaking up the ground. And no one's ever made history by settling for status quo. This is your call. You're called to be the one who will inspire, climb mountains, start a fire that shines brighter than the sun. And you will not waver, you will stand tall, you will be brave. You're gonna be the difference between loving and resistance. So hear me when I say, you are able, you're willing, you're strong, and this is your call. Yes. This is your call. Yes. So be the love, and love will be the change you want to see. Wear what makes you feel good, take who you want to prom, and I will sit with you till there's liberty and justice for all. This is your call. You're called to be the one who will inspire, climb mountains, start a fire that shines brighter than the sun. And you will not waver, you will stand tall, you will be brave. You're gonna be the difference between loving and resistance. So hear me when I say, you are able, you're willing, you're strong. You are able, you're willing, you're strong. You are able, you're willing, you're strong. This is your call. Yes. Listen to me, child, this is your call. Yes. This is your call. 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 This is your call.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Your video froze up a little bit, but your music came through.
On the greatest face ever.
Don't you love the way that happens? It always freezes at the perfect moment.
Yeah, country.
I love it. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. So let's just bring everybody back into this shot here because we've got so much more to talk about. And I'm curious, I know one of the challenges here in Canada, we've talked about a little bit, June, is healthcare for people who are trans. And that I'm sure both of you can speak to what that is like here. Like I remember one of my youth groups when I was in Calgary. One of my students was came out of, not at the time, but a few years later, as trans. And one of the comments that she was making was that she couldn't get her health card changed. She couldn't get her identification changed in Alberta. It was really being a problem. And so, what's been the experience here?
There are some things that Ontario is really good at. Name changes are pretty easy in the province of Ontario compared to other places.
Yeah.
Document changes are there are some hoops you've got to jump through, but the difference between getting, say, a new driver's license from the province of Ontario and a new birth certificate from the state of North Carolina back in the U.S. Yeah. To their credit, the United States has gotten a little better. President Biden has made a few executive orders. It's funny, the week after I applied for my passport, he made an executive order that you didn't have to have a doctor's letter anymore. And I took my doctor's letter in there, and the next week they said, you don't need that anymore. And not long after I applied for my new birth certificate from the state of North Carolina, same thing happened. A trans person down in North Carolina sued the state and won. And so the letter that I got from a doctor that I sent became unnecessary. So it's getting easier.
Wow.
And it's the state of Tennessee, for example. I said, earlier, I was born pretty close to where Dolly Parton was. As the crow flies, the border to Tennessee is not very far from where I was born. If I'd been born there, I couldn't get a new birth certificate because they don't do it. They refuse to do it.
Wow.
And so it varies from place to place. I don't think the gender affirming care in Canada is good at all. People celebrate Canadian healthcare, and maybe if you're not trans, it's worth celebrating. The wait lists are too long. The funding's not high enough. If you're a trans woman in particular, there's a very narrow range of procedures that are covered. Private insurance doesn't top anything up, and the people are way too expensive. So if you wanted to get a group of trans women who've had to raise their own money, pay out of pocket, and leave Canada to get medical care for transition, it's a lot of us, a whole lot of us. I've done that, and if you wanted to talk to some of my American friends, now the interesting thing about America, not everybody has health insurance. Two things where they're better than Canada. The Affordable Care Act under President Obama made it illegal not to cover gender affirming care on insurance.
Wow.
So that's one thing. Two, if you have insurance, you will probably get things covered in the states that OHIP does not cover. So that's a big if. Not everybody has access, but if you are, say, a trans woman in the state of Colorado, you can get way more than a trans woman in Ontario. And it's very frustrating because, oh gosh, I'm sorry. I could stay on this soapbox for the rest of the day. The province is very, very concerned that trans people have the right genitals. And so they'll fund that surgery all day long. Anything else that might actually improve the quality of life for trans people, they do not fund. They just want to make sure that what's between your legs matches your gender identity. And so they'll pay for that every time. So it's so that's their focus. And it's a hard thing to advocate for, especially with the provincial government we've got right now. A couple of provinces have gotten a little better, but that gets my blood pressure up.
Yeah, I can believe it. I can believe it. What about you, Shay? What has your experience been with the medical here in Ontario?
It takes a while for gender affirming procedures to get them done.
Mhm.
The other piece to this that I add to this is that we don't have enough doctors who understand how to relate to trans patients,
Right.
right? And I think that is one of the a really big problem we're running into that I'm personally experiencing.
Mhm.
Um, uh, it feels as if you're sort of like an experiment, you know,
Oh,
going to the doctor,
100%.
having to sort of educate them, although you're yourself somewhat uneducated. I'm not a doctor, right?
of course.
Having to do your own research. You become really good at doing your own research, right? Because they don't know.
Wow.
And, I don't think, oftentimes I feel as if they're not invested in getting to know, even if they're your doctor.
Yeah.
Um, the one good thing I've found is with my doctor's office in particular, if you need to be referred to a specialist, they're good at that. But in terms of they themselves started developing more, um, developing their awareness more, and perhaps how to best serve us medically. I don't think that there's that
We're
interest.
not there yet.
Yeah, and just to sort of go back to the name, changing your name and gender, it's a really long process. And one of the things that I've discovered going through this myself, changing my name, I just changed my name this year.
Yeah.
Um, to change your name, to change your gender, it's a very specific process. You have to deal with the different levels of government, right? Because some things are federal, some things are provincial. If you're also a migrant to this country, it adds to what the things that you need to get done, right?
Yeah.
Just I wish there was a way that they could streamline the process a bit better for us. You know, and that's one of the things that I've found very challenging. Also, one of the things that I've looked at is, lucky for me, I'm okay. I'm in a good financial place, but it's a pretty expensive process for folks who don't have the money.
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about the surgeons. I'm just talking about changing your name and your gender on your identifying documents.
Yeah.
It's costly, right? So
Yeah.
there's still barriers that we have to face, and we still have to try to work through. It's not an easy process, and for some folks out there, they probably be like, probably would say, well, why should you get these things any faster? But for me, it goes to the core of who I am. If you're going to change my anatomy, my name should be easier to change than my
It
anatomy.
yes. I
Essentially, right? That's how I feel.
yeah, no, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Now, what about hormone replacement and stuff like that? Is that part of the challenges? Is some of the medications that are required, or what? Like, I don't really have much information, so I'm kind of
Well, I mean, it depends, I think, on um, it depends on like who you are, whether you are assigned male and transitioning to female, or going on the ride the opposite direction, I like to say.
yeah,
Um, and there are different risk factors involved with taking HRT. I heard a stand-up comic a couple days ago. She did about 5 minutes on birth control, and she was talking about the side effects, and I was like, oh, those are the same side effects as hormone replacement therapy when you're taking estrogen. So um, it's just there are sometimes risks. For
yeah,
the most part, if you start taking estrogen, you're taking on the same risks that cis women have. For example, your risk of breast cancer is
yes,
elevated,
yeah,
and maybe like some stuff around stroke, migraine, stuff like that.
yeah,
it can be hard to find a doctor to prescribe HRT. Here in Toronto, I can't imagine like elsewhere in the province. It may be like in my case, I inject estrogen every 6 days, and my insurance company decided that I shouldn't be taking it that way. So I pay for it out of pocket, because even though my doctor says this is how you need to take your estrogen, my insurance company said, no, it's not. So those are just some of the things
Some of
that
the hoops that
Mhm.
the rest of us don't deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know testosterone is really strong stuff, Shay. So
Oh yeah, oh yeah. There's a lot that comes with it, you know, and it goes back to my one of the things that I often wonder about, why people think this is an easy thing for us to do. You know, why, you know, if
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's easy. I don't know if folks think it's easy to stand in our shoes on a day to day and be who we are, but I can tell you it's pretty challenging. HRT comes with side effects, just like estrogen has its own. And what I will say is that I've had to practice mindfulness. So one of the things that I did was I read a lot before I started, and after I started, you know, there are things that you're sort of aware of, and when it comes up, you're sort of like, okay, because experiencing it is sort of different from hearing or reading about it, right? It's quite different. But I mean, what I say and what I will say every day is that I would never change what I've done.
Uh,
I would never change what I've done, and it has made me feel a lot better. You know, Reverend Junia sort of alluded to mental health stuff. I think a lot of us in the trans community probably do have to process a bit more than the average person, maybe.
I think so. I
Um,
think so.
and for me, it's one of the things where I'm like, now I tell myself I have to take things in stride, just try to be the best human I can be on a day to day and do the best that I can. You know, there are days when you're winning and it's good, and there are days when you just want to be in your bedroom with the lights off and the covers over your head. And, you know, some days you just got to do that, right? But it's not an easy process. I'll tell you this: it's not an easy process. I get my injections every 2 weeks. I can't do it. I'm afraid of needles.
I'll happily inject myself. It's like,
I,
hey, whatever.
I cannot listen. I felt better after my doctor said to me, "Well, I couldn't do it either." So I was like, "Okay, you can give it to me, but you can't do it." So that makes sense. But thank you, right? So you know, you do what you have to. And I
Yeah.
remember I went to a birthday celebration a couple of weeks ago, and you know, a friend that was there said to me, looked at me, and he said, "You know, I know I said this before, but you're more yourself now than I've ever seen you."
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Because the
know,
real you is showing up now,
yeah,
right?
yeah. People are. My confidence is through
Yeah.
the roof. Like, you know, it's almost like I walk with my shoulders back. Before I used to walk and sort of hunch to try to hide my chest. I
Yeah.
hated every photo I was in. Now I'm posing for the camera, right? So
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that, because I think that's one of the big misunderstandings is that it's not you're trying to be something other than what you are. You're trying to be you. Just let the real you out. I think our world is in the mess that it's in because people are hiding. We're ashamed of who we are, and so we project our limitations and our frustrations and our whatever onto the world around us. Then we behave in angry, crazy ways, when really, if we just found our true self and lived from our authenticity, then everything changes. And of course, you just need to. Why can't you just be you? That's what I don't understand about the haters out there is, what are you hating on? This has nothing to do with you.
um,
Right?
there's
That's
a there's a wonderful trans memoir called Tomorrow Will Be Different by Sarah McBride, who was the first trans person to address a national political convention. She is serving as a state senator in Delaware, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think she's running for national office now. She's wonderful, and President Biden wrote the foreword to her book, and what she says in her book is always stuck with me. She talks about how everybody has something inside them that the world has told them to be ashamed of.
Yes.
Everybody, you know, whatever it is, it's the thing that kind of puts a little chip on your shoulder, or it's the thing that you really try to hide.
Yeah.
And trans people take that thing that the world has told them to be ashamed of, and they say, well, yeah, this is me, and they make it, and they wear it like a badge of honor, and that scares people to death, because folks don't want to face what's inside them. When I still had my job at my old church, I reached out to a colleague who works at a church here in Mississauga and who's gay, and I asked him, well, what's a week in the life of your church like? Is it like glitter and pride parades and stuff? And he said, no, it's like worship planning and budget meetings and, you know, making sure the sanctuary is ready for worship and printing bulletins. And he said, you know,
Cleaning the bathroom and sweeping the floor.
all that stuff. Yeah. Because people were kind of afraid, look, are we going to become the trans church? And he did say, you know, the one thing that changed is that even though my congregation felt a little betrayed at first, soon we all found our way into this deeper level of vulnerability where we could really rely on one another and open up to one another and grow closer to one another. And that's beautiful. It's so beautiful because there's so many places in the world where you're taught to hide something about yourself.
Yes.
And not just church, but church especially. And so
And our homes.
that scares people. You know,
Yeah.
it really does.
Yeah, I think really being real in our lives, we've been taught. I remember as a young girl that I was taught, you know, what happens in the house stays in the house. You don't talk about that outside. This stays hidden, and we wonder why there's been so much trauma within families and everything when that's sort of the message that we're being given. Dr. Robert, he's the founder of the New Thought Network. You got any thoughts you'd like to share on this beautiful topic of? And you're muted. Just there we go. Okay.
Yes. Well, I have to begin with absolute gratitude and thank you. Junia, Shay, thank you so much for being you. And Barbara, thank you for coming to me with this idea, because what we've just experienced is really a demonstration of the vision that I've always held for what New Thought Media Network can be, a place where we can have a conversation and actually go beyond the easy trappings, if you will, or the surface layer. And, you know, what I heard tonight is I heard the human story. I heard it in music. I heard it in the stories that each of you have spoken, and there's so many I can relate to. Junia, when you shared the congregational vote about a pastor, I get all sweaty because I've been there, and I heard the human condition in everything that you've shared. And that's where it gets, because I'm the cisgender white guy that didn't have to deal with the added layers of junk, didn't have to deal with those added layers of, yeah, it's hard enough just to believe you're good enough, but then to have everybody telling you no, you're not.
Yeah.
And near the end here, this point that we are afraid.
Yeah.
People are afraid, and they would rather be able to look at each of you and deny that they see what they know is the truth. because the easy path has always been to go with what we're assigned at birth.
Yeah.
It's scary to come to a realization that says, wow, so we're talking about identity here when we're talking about gender. We're not talking about biology. We're talking about identity. And how can I accept you for who you are? Because truthfully, I'm afraid to be who I am.
Yeah. That's
So
the truth.
we all get some of this in our own ways. And to be able to see the relatable stories that I know Barbara Jean, when she first came to me with this program, we were like, we have to be in a place where people recognize the normality of all of us. If we
Yeah.
are all one, you are my sister and you are my brother and you are my sister and you are my brother, and we are all one in this thing together. And what I love is every time I get to eavesdrop, I get to witness a conversation like this, I get to grow too. I
Yeah.
get to expand my awareness, and I get to I trust I am better living into the role of what you each would consider an ally,
Yeah.
knowing full well that I don't get to say that about myself,
Yeah.
but I've got to demonstrate that at a greater degree, not a greater degree, but I have to be willing to demonstrate that about myself so that everyone else sees that about everyone around me, regardless of how we choose to represent ourselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been sitting in the back going, "Oh, I got that one. I got that. Yeah, I got that one. I'm with you, Shay. I know how that feels." And and I do. I feel embarrassed because the easy path, or so we are taught, just keeps piling things on
Mhm.
anyone that isn't, quote, on the easy path.
Yeah.
We pile on extra steps of bureaucracy when it comes to healthcare. I know here in Colorado, it it was never an easy process, and I think in America we get this hyperbolic perspective sometimes fed to us that we're just chopping off body parts and mutilating children, and that's not what's going on.
No,
And Colorado did have a really great care system built up to support youth in stepping into their authenticity a lot earlier in life and with less obstruction. Unfortunately, Children's Hospital and the major providers here announced just a few months back that they're suspending all gender affirming surgeries until further notice. And nobody really knows what's going to happen.
wow.
But we all are getting this opportunity to recognize a deeper truth of what is happening and what isn't happening,
Yeah.
and how to have a respectful conversation that says, hey, this is what I know, and it would appear to be maybe a little different than what others out there know. So thank you both again for being so authentic, for giving the rest of us a deeper understanding of how in our oneness we all face a unique experience, and you're both a testament to your own experience that is making all of us more aware of our oneness.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, when I look at the world at large and I look at some of the disconnection that happens, I mean, the way that we live is to separate. We find ways of pushing people away or creating them and us, creating othering. And I think that's sort of our biggest challenge right now is can we come to a place where we look at each other and we begin to see who's really in front of me. And it is a mirror of my soul, right? That we're all connected and that somehow each of our stories is just part of that journey. And the more authentically we live, the more courageously we live, the more likely we are to be happy. And I think that's a good thing.
Something I've also thought about while doing this. Many of us grew up in families or religious bodies where we're told to tell the truth. So now we're telling the truth of who we are.
I don't like it.
Somehow it's unacceptable. We're doing exactly what we're taught to do.
Yes. Thank you for that, Shay. That's so right on.
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth and tell it quickly. And nobody wants to hear it. They want the truth according to their standard, right?
Yeah.
I want truth that makes you comfortable.
Yeah, and on top of that, the other one that we're taught is to love everyone, right?
Yeah.
So between truth and love, I should be able to exist freely.
Yes, you should. You should. This is a human rights conversation. And all of us have the right to live our own humanity, whatever that looks like. I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time. I can't believe how fast this went. I thought I had sort of allotted too much time, and now I'm going, it's nowhere near enough time. We might have to do another one of these at a later date. I want to thank you all for being here. This is, for me, human rights are number one on my list. It's the most important thing to me. And I think that as we learn more about each other, we become more accepting and honoring of each other. So I think love really is the answer. And love means acceptance. And if each one of us lived in our lane and didn't worry about our head, we'd be doing much better overall. So I am so grateful to each and every one of you. Can we give like a quick little, we've only got a couple minutes, final thought? What is the one thing you want our viewers to take away from this experience tonight? One thing, Reverend June.
Well, we're all human. Trans people are flesh and blood. We're not this hypothetical, theoretical topic of debate. We're the people that live and love and work and play in your own communities. And so as you get to know us, it's a little harder to hate us, I think.
I agree. You're a hockey mom. I love that. I'm a hockey mom too. Being a hockey mom requires early mornings. Often. What about you, Shay? A lot of coffee, yes. Shay, one final thought.
For me, we're all humans. We breathe the same, right? We eat the same for most of us, right? And so for me, at the end of the day, I am practicing what I was taught when I was growing up, which is to be truthful, right? And to love. So I love myself. I am honest about who I am, and I will continue just being that, right? It's up to everyone to decide how they want to relate to the world around them and even to me or any other trans identified person. And for myself, one of the things that I appreciate about you having us on this forum is that it gives us an opportunity for people to again see us as humans, as another person. Right? That's it.
I love it. Thank you. Summer, what final word have you got?
Well, I was going to say pretty much around the same thing, because I usually say, we're all just souls in earth suits trying to figure out this human experience, right? But I do believe that we're moving in the right direction, and change is happening, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, whether or not you approve. And one of two things will happen: you'll either walk with it mindfully, or you'll be dragged. And so we're doing the damn thing.
Yeah, we are.
And I'm really grateful for that. I also want to say to Reverend June, I'm from Southern Illinois, like close.
Yeah, my boss is too.
and you said Baptist, and I thought, oh girl, like I got goosebumps on my face because I was worried for you already, and I hadn't even heard your story.
Yeah.
It's just I'm so grateful to have met all of you.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here, and thank you for doing the stuff that you do. Because we can't do this alone.
It takes a village. It takes a village. Reverend Robert, final thought?
Witness more, listen more, and get to know the people around you. Because as we get to know more people and unique people and people that don't see the world and don't have the background or the experience that we do, we get a fuller and richer understanding of our oneness.
I love that.
And,
I love
and,
that.
and I do want to say on behalf of New Thought Media Network, you all have an open invitation to any show that we do. You just let me know. I'll make it happen.
Thank you.
This was fabulous. We loved having you all.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I am so grateful to all of you to take the time to do this. And it's been a very rich and rewarding experience for me. I'm grateful to the New Thought Media Network that allows me to do all these fun things that I get to do. But I'm just super grateful to each one of you that you share your love, your light, and that you stand in your authentic self, being courageous in a world that really could use more examples of what courage really is. And so I love you all. I appreciate you. And I'm just so grateful you are here tonight. So thank you, everyone. Well, everybody, we've been watching Transgender Awareness here on the New Thought Media Network. And I'm just so grateful you are here. And I just want to say, love is the answer. Doesn't really matter what the question is. And human rights, human rights, human rights. We're all human. God bless. Bye for now.